In this video, I'm going to bring together the RAS model and the memory-based model to show you how it works. First, I'm going to talk about somebody who's ambivalent, then I'm going to talk about somebody who's univalent, so you can see how these two ideas interact with one another. So let me start off by describing the setup that we have here. You can see that there's a person's head, and there's a circle representing the top of the head and a circle representing the back of the head. You can see also that at the top of the head, there's one plus sign and one minus sign. The plus sign denotes something they like about the president. The negative sign denotes something that they don't like about the president. The plus sign is blue, and you'll see all the plus signs are blue, and the red minus sign is red in all of the in this presentation. We're going to assume that the president is a Democrat, and that's why the plus signs are blue and the minus signs are red. In the back of this person's head, they have more information stored, but keep in mind that information in the back of the head is harder to access from memory. But in this case, they have 6 things that they like about the president and 6 things they don't like about the president. And so that's why we call this person ambivalent, because they have conflicting attitudes about the president, who in this particular example is a Democrat. What we're going to assume is that when they take a random sample, if they get mostly things that they like about the president, then they're going to say they approve of the job the president is doing. If they take a random sample of attitudes and they get mostly negative attitudes, they're going to say they disapprove of the job the president is doing. And so that's the setup that we have here. Now, one of the things you might note is there's only 2 attitudes at the top of the head. The reason for that is in this example, this person who's ambivalent is just not somebody who's very interested in politics. They really like sports, they like going to the movies, they have a variety of other interests, but politics isn't one of them, so they don't keep information about politics or the president at the top of their head. It's just not something that they're interested in. Now it's at the end of a long day, and they hop in their car to drive home, and the radio's on. And it just turns out that the radio's on liberal talk radio. And so they decide to listen. Now when I say liberal talk radio, what I mean is that the person on the news is going to be saying things that are going to be favorable about the Democratic president. So they're driving along, just sort of listening, and ambivalent people don't counter-argue information. So they hear something positive coming out of the microphone. You can see the microphone on the right-hand side. Something positive is being said about the Democratic president, and now where they had one positive and one negative attitude at the top of their head, well, now they have 2 positive ones. So they just heard something about the president that they like. They're like, oh, I didn't know that. And they continue driving, and as they continue driving, the person on the news continues to say favorable things about the president, and you can see that at the top of the head, there are more and more positive attitudes being sort of, or that are available at the top of the head, because this person doesn't counter-argue. Ambivalents don't counter-argue information. They just take it in. So every time they hear something new, they're like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. So finally, they're listening for a while. You can see now their head is full of positive attitudes about the president, and now they're home. And they get home, and they walk in the door, and the phone rings. And it's the Gallup people. And they're doing a poll, and this is a very good polling agency. And they ask him a number of questions to make sure that he's willing to do the poll. And the first question they ask is, do you approve or disapprove of the job the president is doing? And again, we're assuming for the sake of this presentation, the president is a Democrat. Well, based on the memory-based model, what is this person going to do? They're going to take a random sample of attitudes, mostly from the top of the head, not so much from the back of the head, and based on that, they're going to express an opinion. And so the circles at the top of the head and in the back of the head denote the attitudes that this person randomly sampled. And when you total up everything that they sampled from the top of the head and the back of the head, they sampled 4 things they like about the president. They sampled 2 things that they didn't like about the president. And so now they're prepared to give an answer. And they say, I approve of the job the president is doing. This is the memory-based model. This is how it works. Now, it's a week later. We still have our same person who's ambivalent. You'll notice that at the top of his head, there's still just one thing positive and one thing negative about the president who's a Democrat. And although you might not have noticed it, I put an additional attitude in the positive attitude in the back of the head as a result of everything they heard on the radio last week when they were listening. So now they have slightly more positive than negative in the back of the head, but still the top of the head, they just aren't interested in politics. And so they get into their car and they flip on the radio, and this time it's conservative talk radio. Somebody changed the station in their car. Doesn't matter why, we're just going to go with it. And on conservative talk radio, what they're going to do is they're going to be saying negative things about the Democratic president. And so they're sitting there and they're listening and they're driving along and they hear something negative about the president. And now you can see that again at the top of their head, they have now an additional negative thing in the top of their head. And the more that they talk about the president, the more negative things, because people who are ambivalent don't counter-argue information. And so the back of his head is staying the same, but the top of the head, now there's way more negative things than positive things. It started off with 1 positive and 1 negative. Well, this person, they finally get home and they haven't kind of argued everything. They walk in the door and it's Gallup again, calling them on the phone again. And of course, the first question they ask after finding out if they're 18, to make sure that they're an appropriate person to call, the first thing that they do is they ask, do you approve or disapprove of the job the president is doing, right? Standard questions they ask. What's this person going to do? Are you getting tired of me saying this? They're going to take a random sample of attitudes, mostly from the top of the head, not so much from the back of the head. And based on that, they're going to express an opinion. Well, in this case, the random sample yields a different result than the first time. Now they've sampled, both from the top of the head and the back of the head, 4 things they dislike and 2 things they like. And so they do their random sample and they say, I disapprove of the job the president is doing. Now again, this is the same person before who said they approve. This time they're saying they disapprove, not because they're dumb, not because they have no thought in their head. They're not flipping coins and making stuff up, but because of the way people answer survey questions, somebody who's ambivalent could say approve one time, disapprove the next time, and maybe the next time if he drove home and it was Gallup called again, if he was listening to sports where there was nothing said, their attitudes would probably stay about the same and they'd say, I don't approve or disapprove. They'd be like, I don't know. Now this is different than univalence, and that's where the RAS model comes into the story. On the left you can see somebody who at the top of their head and the back of the head has mostly negative attitudes about the Democratic president. On the right-hand side, there's somebody who strongly approves of the president. They mostly have positive attitudes at the top of the head and the back of the head. And so now this person who's really interested in politics, this person gets in the car. This is somebody who's univalent, and they're listening to conservative talk radio, right? But the thing about people who are univalent is that they counter-argue. So they start hearing negative things about the Democratic president, but what do? They start rejecting that information. They start arguing, no, that's not true. What about this? What about that? Maybe they're saying mean things about the person on the radio just, as a way of counter-arguing. And so no matter how much negative things they hear about the president, they're just going to reject that information. They're just going to counter-argue that information. So they're listening to talk radio. They're listening to conservative talk radio. They're being exposed to negative information, but because they counter-argue, it's not affecting what's stored in memory. And so when they get home, having just listened to a bunch of negative things about the Democratic president, they get home and Gallup calls and they ask, do you approve or disapprove of the job the president is doing? And again, the president is a Democrat. They're going to take a random sample of attitudes, mostly from the top of the head, not so much from the back of the head. And you can see that in this depiction, the random sample yielded 6 things they liked about the president and nothing that they disliked about the president. And as a result, they say, I approve. This is how the memory-based model works. And also, this is how univalents respond to information that challenges their pre-existing beliefs. They counter-argue versus ambivalents who accept information and they don't counter-argue. So this combines both the RAS model and the memory-based model together.